on to the regular agenda. The Health and Human Services Committee request for authorization to commence litigation against the pharmaceutical.
Move to suspend the rules.
Supported by Commissioner Nelson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. And with that, is there a motion to consider this?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Nelson.
Commissioner Olson, Mr. Chair, was second on that.
Okay.
She just spoke more softly than I did.
Okay, good. Seconded by Commissioner Olson. So with that, I'd look to administration to frame it, or are we going to go to, okay, we will look to the attorney, Attorney Rubin, to frame this.
Thank you, Chair Jewell, members of the board. What you have before you is a request that I'm making of you. First is that you give me authorization to commence a lawsuit. A lawsuit would be directed towards the distributors and towards the manufacturers of the prescription opioids. This is not new litigation. There are approximately 60 other similar lawsuits going on throughout the country. I'm coming to you today because I've heard you tell me what's going on in your communities. Every one of you, at some point or another during conversations, tells me that you're aware of the devastating impact of addiction, of the opioids, and of the heroin use. And you know yourselves when you approved even the additional child protection workers earlier this year. It's a devastating impact that our children are suffering, adults, young adults, older adults. It's across the entire spectrum. I'm here today also because of the work done by previous people in our community. There's a number of leaders, but in particular, we've got Sheriff Littman, we've got Lieutenant Jeff Kazel, the Duluth Police Department, Greg Anderson, Public Health and Human Services, and in particular Vern Wagner, and Mr. Wagner is here today. These are people who have made a commitment to address this issue. They see the impact of addiction on the community, and they've been wanting to do something about it. As your county attorney, I have a responsibility to help protect children and to address the health and safety of our community. As commissioners, it's one of your core functions also to address the safety and the health concerns, the public health concerns of our community. My other responsibility as your county attorney is to continue to aggressively go after the dealers who are breaking the law, the criminal law, in selling these drugs on the street. We'll continue to do that. But as we do that, we need to address the source of the problem. And I can't do this alone. This is too big of a lawsuit. So the request is twofold. Number one, because of what you've expressed to me already, I would like you to put it in formal form, saying, yes, proceed with the lawsuit, do what you need to do. Number two, I'm going to need help, and there are national law firms, some based here in Minnesota, some elsewhere, who are offering their assistance. And the good part for us is that they will do it without fees, without expenses, and with a resulting 25% contingency rate, if there is and when there is recovery. So I would like to also have your consent, your directive to go ahead and retain who we need to work with me on this matter. And to comfort you even more, I would hope it'll be Nick Campanerio, our litigation specialist, who will be heading this up from the county attorney's office. So with that, it's also important for you to understand that there will be a consequence. One of the things that our numbers show is that when there is a reduction of the prescription of opioid medications, and there's a limit on that supply in a community, you know what happens? The demand for heroin will continue to rise. So I'm very cognizant of that. We're doing something, we're trying to anticipate the consequences So we will continue to aggressively work with law enforcement who sees all this devastation firsthand. We'll work with them to address the dealers and those who are addicted in our community and they are caught with drugs or they lower level offense. We're going to work with drug court. We have no desire to make more criminals. We'll work that angle too. But just, you know, we're trying to take the whole big picture into consideration. I think this is what the community wants. I know this is what I've heard from you. So I would ask your support and your votes on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Rubin. I do know that we have one citizen who wishes to speak to this, Vern Wagner. Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I want to first off say thank you to our County Attorney, Mark Rubin, for taking this on. This is a very brave thing to do in Minnesota. I believe we're going to be one of the first, if not the first county in Minnesota to do this. And that shows exactly the type of leadership that we have up here. There was just an article in the Star Tribune that talked about the opioid withdrawal unit that we are soon to be opening here in Duluth. Again, that's a first in the state of Minnesota and one of the firsts in the country. And it's important to recognize that because of the hard work of our county and all the partners that are involved in this, we're making some very big changes. We don't know if they're going to be the right fixes, but we have to try these methods, and they're big methods. There's an old saying in the 12-step program that says half measures will avail you nothing. So we can't do half measures. We have to go after this. If any of you saw the pharmaceutical story on 60 Minutes and talked about how the pharmaceutical industry and those that are in that business of distribution, how they targeted one small little town that had like 900 people in the town, and they sent them well over 1 million or 2 million doses of opioids. There's no way these people were using that in that little town. It became a distribution center. That's how reckless it's become in this business. I had to tell Commissioner Jewell about it because he hasn't seen television since 1991. And I had to tell him that Fathers Knows Best is no longer on television, so he's a little bit dismayed about that. But there's another part of this. When we opened up the opioid withdrawal unit, as you well know, we announced it here, we received about $600,000 from the state of Minnesota. Now, we had asked for $1.4 million from the state of Minnesota to do all the programs that the Opioid Advisory Response Group had identified. We got less than half of that. So we need to find funding outside taxpayers. And honestly, taxpayers shouldn't be putting up all the money for this. This is coming, as we well know, from the pharmaceutical industries. So it's important that we hold these people responsible, because these tax dollars that we're using to fight this, whether it be through the police, whether it be through our emergency medical systems, that is money being taken away from other county uses. So it's very important that you all understand, and I know you do, the importance of this lawsuit. But there's one more thing that I'm going to get in trouble for, but I don't represent anybody. I'm just a community person. I'm by myself. And I believe that we need to also, as a partner, not in a lawsuit, but as a partnership, we need to go after, not go after, that's a terrible word. We need to open up a very good dialogue with the prescribers in the region, whether it be Essentia, St. Luke's, medical providers up on the range, dentists. These are the folks that prescribe these. And we all know that Essentia has identified 10,000 patients, and this is regionally, who are using opioids for chronic pain. Of those 10,000, 2,500 were identified as being addicted to opioids. Now that's one system. When they boot these people off these drugs, they become our problem. That's going to come out of all of our tax dollars to help these people, and we're going to help them. That's what we do. But we need to have a dialogue opened up with these medical providers and say, look, you share a responsibility here. We need you to come up with funding and programming to help us with this. This opioid withdrawal unit that the Center for Drug and Alcohol is doing is a great idea. But the medical providers should have been doing this, should be helping us with this. We have too many kids that are dying from this terrible disease. I would also ask you to take a look at the stigma of what this is doing. And we need to identify the stigma that drug addiction has in our communities and make sure we educate people to realize this can happen to any of us. It can happen to any of our children. We need to open those doors to make sure that if somebody needs help, they can get help. A good example of that is the needle exchange program. We're trying to bring that up on the range right now and have a needle exchange program up on the range. Everybody thinks it's a great idea, but nobody wants to have it in my community. That's a problem. That's a stigma. We need leadership on that. And you all are that leadership that we have. So I want to congratulate us for having this, and I urge you to vote for it. I'm sure you will. But I think this is a half measure that we need to go a step further. And I believe that the medical providers need to be urged to step up and to help us with this problem. They're part of the creation of this problem too. So let's recognize that. They need to be held and brought to the table and say, we need your help. Let's do this as partners. Not as litigants, let's do this as partners. Right. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Okay, so I have Commissioner Boyle and then Nelson to say something. Commissioner Boyle.
I just want to, very short, but I want to thank Attorney Rubin on his leadership on this. This is so very important, and the speaker was absolutely right. I so boast what St. Louis County has done so far regarding opiate heroin abuse. We are one of the leaders not only in Minnesota but in the nation. We continue this trend with this open lawsuit against 3 of the pharmaceuticals and 3 of the distributors that have made hundreds of millions of dollars. The one thing that I always try to lead us on how it affects us as a county is, you know, we have just under 800 kids in out-of-home placement at a cost of just over 10% of property taxes in St. Louis County. And a super majority of those kids, I can guarantee, are off the opiate and heroin epidemic. It's a drug that is so unique in so many different ways. It affects males and females the same, and affects all socioeconomic classes the same. So it's a step in the right direction. There'll be future tough decisions this board will make. But again, thank you, Attorney Rubin, for your guidance on this. And look forward to where we are in the next few years.
Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Commissioner Jewell. Only because a couple of my fellow commissioners are way too modest to say anything about themselves. But Commissioner Boyle, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your leadership in Health and Human Services. It has shown since the very first day that you took over chairing that. And Chair Commissioner Jewell, again, for your leadership in guiding this as our attorney's office has taken the lead. Attorney Rubin and I, we share one thing in common, and over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, we've both become grandparents. And when you become a grandparent, you stop worrying about the world that you're living in, and you start worrying about the world that they're going to live in. And I've noticed that in all grandparents. When they become a grandparent, the world that they live in becomes secondary. And it takes guts to do this. The people of St. Louis County very rightfully placed in your hands in those elections the ability to protect them. And these are bold steps. They're very bold steps. But Attorney Rubin, I have no doubt that you and your staff, working with our Health and Human Services folks, are going to make a very compelling argument that what these pharmaceutical companies is not the use of a quality drug, but it is, in fact, the abuse and over manufacture of drugs. Mr. Chair, I'm going to also challenge this board to do one other thing. A number of years ago, this board took very much a leadership role when this county was plagued by the production of methamphetamine. But yet today, the base drug that is necessary for methamphetamine, ephedrine, is still being produced in 2 of our major trade partners' countries, both in Germany and in China. Ephedrine is being produced at a rate of about 40 to 50% more than what is being sold on the prescription market worldwide. And our trade partners, and I'm keying in there on ephedrine, but folks, we know in the past when we have went after one drug, that shift that Attorney Rubin talked about, that our Sheriff's Department talks about, was absolutely the result. So if this board can be so bold as to make this step, perhaps we can also be so bold as to request of our federal representatives. I know I've personally had this conversation a number of times with Senator Klobuchar, and I know she would absolutely take the lead on this, but there's an awful lot of money that flows around Washington, D.C., and somehow these trade partners managed to get by with not having legislation passed that would be punitive legislation against them. And again, today I'm calling out China and Germany because I know that those are the 2 major producers of ephedrine. And perhaps we can piggyback on this, Mr. Chair, with a letter from this board to our congressional delegation urging them to take action steps against our trade partners on ephedrine and some of those countries that worldwide that we offer a tremendous amount of support to that continue to produce poppies and heroin that ultimately is destined for our shores. So my challenge is that we do this, which is above and beyond, but that we also go that next step. Mr. Chair, thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Boyle and Attorney Rubin.
Commissioner Rukavina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Attorney Rubin. And, you know, nobody's going to be against this resolution because it'd be like being against mom and apple pie. And so I have some comments and some questions. You know, the only way you can solve this problem, and I want to thank Mr. Wagner. Attorney Rubin, you said you're going to go after the dealers, so I'm wondering, as Mr. Wagner brought up, what we're going to do with the doctors who are giving out these prescriptions. I had hurt my back 3 years ago. I got box or thing of pills. I took one. It made me goofier than I normally am. It's sitting on a shelf. I'll give you the rest, Commissioner Stauber, as you look over at me. And then I hurt my back. And of course, you get some more of them. And you don't take them. They sit on the shelf, you know. They're just being given out by doctors for any pain. And I can understand because some people are suffering. And for a year, my back hurt like hell, and it's getting a little better. But I never took any of the drugs because they made me feel worse. But there are people who, for whatever reason, maybe they don't handle pain right. Maybe they got too much pain in their life that doesn't deal with their back problems at all. And the only way, and I've been around for a long time, I saw the crisis for when kids were huffing or whatever the heck they were doing with PAM, was that called? That you sprayed in your frying pan, and then there was the methamphetamine, and we stopped selling those drugs, and we still haven't solved the problem because I read the court cases in Virginia in the Mesaba Daily News, and person after person after person is getting picked up for methamphetamine. And now we got this crisis. My feeling is the only way you solve drug abuse is to give people hope, and I think Mr. Wagner would agree with me on that. When you have in the first whereas that we got parents, children, and grandparents that are hooked and have drug problems, to me, you can sue anybody you want. You're not going to solve the problem. The only way you solve the problem is to give them a good job, and the only way you get a good job is to get a good education. And I don't want to jump in the weeds here, but, you know, a week or two ago, whenever it was, I tried to get us to use some of our iron ore royalties to give kids hope, good kids, to send them to school so they're not graduating with a house mortgage, and all they got is a 2-year degree. The second highest 2-year educational programs in the country in expense and tuition is here, right here in Minnesota and St. Louis County. So you will not solve this problem without giving people hope, getting that first generation in that family to get a higher education. And maybe then she'll help her little brother or little sister get another higher education degree and get them out of that cycle. And I'm glad you brought up, Attorney Rubin, the fact that the next drug we may be jumping to is heroin. And I don't know how you stop that illegal drug trade other than to give people hope that they don't want to be on that and ruin their lives and ruin their kids' lives. I don't disagree with any of these whereases until I get to the lawsuit. And I know how long it took for the tobacco settlement, years and years. And so if I could ask a number of questions and you'd write them down for me for answers, Attorney Rubin, I don't know how long you think this is going to take, but I'm thinking it could take decades, or at least a decade. I want to make sure that if there is a settlement, that this board that has to raise taxes all the time on the levy to take care of these problems, and we did it over the last couple of years in Health and Human Services, Commissioner Boyle, by hiring a bunch of child care protection people because of this problem. So we already jumped out ahead of this by taxing our constituents. But I want to know if there's a settlement that this board is going to control that settlement, that it's going to be used for the purposes you state in these whereases. And to me, the most important use of it is to educate people, that there is hope, that you can go to school, that you can get a good job, that you can have a good family, that you don't have to live in poverty. The other question I have is, do you even know or have an idea what the financial recovery is? And I had a question about how attorneys work for free, because I've never known an attorney that worked for free. And I'm glad you addressed that there's going to be a contingency fee of 25%. But to me then, that's already, why am I here? Am I here to be a bobblehead again for administration? And now the attorney, because I read in this morning's Mesaba Daily News, you made front page, Attorney Rubin, you looked great in the picture, and it said, we're going to pass this today. Well, yeah, I know we're going to pass. So who's going to be against going after the pharmaceutical industry? I've never liked them from the day I was old enough to no better. But where's that settlement, if it comes, going to go? Because this board got to be the one to raise taxes to take care of the problem. And I don't like the fact that you're the only one that gets to decide this, that it's at your discretion, because I think we should remain informed. I think Commissioner Boyle should be on a committee to track this for us, and maybe a northern commissioner can be on there too, so we know what's going on. Because you state that other than staff time required to assist and provide necessary information to the law firm, I don't know what that cost is going to be. And I don't know what those people are doing currently in your attorney's office that we free them up to get whatever information and assistance you're going to give them. So, and I also have a question on the final whereas, and the county could also pursue claims under Minnesota law to mitigate and damage caused by the opioid crisis. That's another question I have for you. Are you going to do that with your own staff and have a parallel lawsuit that you cite here in this last whereas? Because I don't disagree with what you're trying to do. I'm just saying this isn't going to happen overnight. And I don't know how much money we're going to spend of our staff time doing it. And I don't want a big settlement to be in another fund at the attorney's office or at the sheriff's office, and there's several of those funds. You have a budget of $8 million, you get $2.5 million from other sources. I don't even know what they are. I know you get $5 million approximately on the levy, $5.5 million. You got a bunch of different, I guess, sources of money from forfeitures to other things that we never see. So my concern is I do not want to see, if there is a big settlement, that settlement just go in some rabbit hole. I want us to have control over it. We are the final say in this county. We are both the executive branch, I guess, and the legislative branch, so to speak. Although sometimes the governor over here thinks that he's the executive branch. But anyway, those are my concerns. And I don't like the at your discretion. I think we go out for bid on all other things. How do we know there isn't a reputable law firm that'll do this for 20% or 15%? So there's a lot of cloudy issues here. I have no problem with the first half of all the whereases. I agree with you. It's a cross-generational thing. It's a terrible situation, the opioid addiction. It's the neonatal abstinence syndrome. It's terrible. Law enforcement and staff are being stretched, but we've tried to take care of that. None of this other stuff I disagree with, but I do have a problem with you having sole discretion, us not being involved. If the contingency can be smaller than 25%, and I'm just wondering what kind of money we're talking about here. Maybe you have you certainly have an idea, I'm sure. I don't have any idea what we're talking about. I know what the tobacco settlement was, and by the way, after fighting the tobacco industry for years and years and years, I don't know if I sat on the committee that spent it. Speaker Swiggum put me on because he thought I'd be one Democrat that would have some common sense on how it was spent. You know, we gave it to unions because their members were high smokers. We gave it to this group, that group, and I don't even know if any of it's left. And I hate to see that happen if we get a big settlement. I'd like to see that money put somewhere where it can be used on and on and on, year after year and year after year, to do good things and help us out with this terrible situation. So that's my concern, and maybe you can answer some of those questions, Attorney.
We actually have a request for personal privilege, so we'll take 5 minutes and we'll come back.
Is that Apple?
No? Yeah. Let's start up again. We'll continue the discussion of our first item. And I think you were asked a question.
A number of them.
Number of them, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Jewell, I'm going to just respond by number one. This is your lawsuit. It's not mine, okay? I'm doing it on behalf of you and the people of the county, okay? Number two, any kind of settlement, obviously, and that will come and talk to you. So a lot of the questions are good, I get it, but these are questions that will be addressed as we proceed and we get into closed session and as attorney-client type situation. So that's my response. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I'll let you finish up, but Commissioner Boyle had his hand up as well.
Thank you. Off of response to Commissioner Rukavina, the one thing I can tell you as Director of Health and Human Services, that Attorney Rubin has been very open with me about the dialogue on the vetting of this lawsuit. Him and his staff have put in a number of hours looking at different lead attorneys, and I have full faith in Attorney Rubin, as does St. Louis County, regarding his expertise. So I am absolutely 100% behind him on whatever their decision is on an attorney in the future. Thank you.
Commissioner Rukavina.
Well, Commissioner Boyle, I'm glad, that you are. But the bottom line is we're the ones that have to tax people and raise money and set budgets. And I've been here now, 2015, I didn't set the budget in 14. I had been elected but had no input. We raised taxes, I believe, 2.5% on the levy. We didn't do anything on 16. In 17, we did 8.5%, and then this year we're proposing 4.5%. So we are the stewards of this budget. And, not all of St. Louis County might have the same opinion as you. I don't. I like the fact that the attorney's bringing this. I think it's a good idea to pursue. I am saying, in my experience, and I'm just going by the tobacco settlement, Commissioner Boyle, this could take years. It could take a decade. It could take more. And if we got county staff that's doing it year after year after year, there's a lot of money. I'm just thinking we should have some input on it. I understand that the attorney is elected and can basically probably could have initiated this on his own. I don't know for a fact if he could have or not. He probably could have. Where he would get money if money's needed, he'd have to come to the board. I'm just, again, concerned that if we have a big settlement, is there a law firm that would do it for 20% instead of 25%? If there's a big settlement, where's that money going? Because there are funds, and particularly in our sheriff and attorney's office, that we don't see. We never see them. Law library funds, forfeiture funds, grants for this, grants for that. And so that's what I'm concerned about. We win $10 million, what do we do with it? Does the attorney spend it or do the board spend it? That's what my questions were. That's what my concerns are. So, and I would just, one more question to the attorney that I don't think would hurt for a public answer is, I'm just wondering, how often do we retain outside law firms? Do you have any other things you're pursuing where we hire an outside law firm?
Attorney Rubin.
Chair, Commissioner Jewell, Commissioner Rukavina, we retain them when we need them. Right now, there's nobody else I'm retaining. And the other thing, too, I'll speak as far as the staff and the extra time. I'm not asking for extra bodies. We'll do this over and above what we do, and you're still going to, and this is extra time. This is how we do it. If you're not, this is not a request for extra help. So
I'm just curious, what are the FTEs in your department again?
I don't have off the top of my head. I've got 80 staff members.
And how many are attorneys?
32.
Okay. Commissioner Stauber.
Thank you, Chair Jewell. Attorney Rubin, thanks for your leadership on this. I've known you for a lot of years when I worked as a police officer on the street, and I have the utmost respect for your decision in bringing this to the board. Chair Boyle and Commissioner Olson, you two have been on the front lines as well as I have. There's not, I don't think there's anybody on this board that was at the street level and saw the devastation to human beings and the family that I have. I've seen and had to comfort parents of a deceased child in their bedroom from overdoses. I've had to give notifications of deceased family members because of overdoses. It's one of the most horrible things that law enforcement officers have to do. I have seen this firsthand, the devastation, and as Commissioner Boyle said, it cuts across every socioeconomic side in this community, the rich, the poor, middle class. In fact, I shared with you that towards the end of my career in Duluth, there was a 72-year-old female overdosing. I've seen lives saved not only from the Duluth Police Department, but the fire department using Narcan. They're on their last breath. This is killing these people. And I am very proud to be a member of this board at this time so we can fight what we think is right. And so I don't want to belabor the point, but I have smelt this devastation. I have felt this devastation. I have heard this devastation. And we need to continue to work on it. A couple of points I would like to make. I think Mr. Wagner talked about some doctors, and we need to get the doctors involved. We have the Opioid Abuse Reduction Strategies Group that has been, we've had trying to get the best practices and to let the doctors in the area and in the state to understand that some people, they doctor shop on Friday afternoons and stuff. So that has been in place, and I'm proud of that group. I just want to also say that, you know, we talk about holding the dealers responsible. I totally agree with that. We have a federal system that is not as lenient as the state. And when we can get the federal government prosecuting these people who are killing our children and family members, it's going to be eye-opening. I will say to Commissioner Rukavina, I just have 2 points on some of your concerns. You had mentioned that you had taken some prescription drugs or what have you. One of the things we talk about on education is, this is Education 101. If, and this goes for anybody in the community, if you have prescription drugs that you have no longer use for them because your diagnosis or your pain is better, we have drop boxes throughout this community. Because what we don't want is our young citizens, young or old, to reach into your medicine cabinet and use in your bathroom and taking that. That happens. And lastly, Commissioner Rukavina, you had mentioned you'd never known an attorney to work for free. I have a relative, Larry Stauber, who worked for many, many years in Duluth. He told me personally that he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars not charging people because he felt that they couldn't pay. My cousin Larry, former Judge Stauber, spent a lot of his time on pro bono. So I wanted to make a plug for my cousin Larry, who worked for free as an attorney for many people in this community, and I'm proud to say that he's my relative. Attorney Rubin, you have all my support, and I think the board has spoken, and I'm excited to get this endeavor going, and I'm more excited that we are on board to stop the devastation within our community, and I think that this board has spoken. Chair Boyle, Commissioner Olson, thank you.
Are there any other comments by commissioners? Commissioner Rukavina.
Commissioner Stauber, I'm glad, you know, I've heard about those drop boxes too, and I should probably follow through on it, because I got all kinds of pills I've been given for pain that are sitting in the medicine cabinet. I have no young people around anymore, but I don't know, can we just bring them to the sheriff's office? Can we bring them to the police department?
Yes.
I mean, I know we're not supposed to throw them down.
Right.
Because then you get frogs with 12 legs or whatever, but, so I'm glad on that, and I just want to point out to you, this isn't being done. And I know your cousin. I voted for him. He's a Stauber that I did vote for, in fact. So I voted for him. But pro bono work is different than this, and there is a contingency here, and it's 25%. It's not free.
Okay. Seeing no other commissioners, I'll just say that one of the things, you know, money does hurt. Sadly, people who deal but run companies commonly don't go to prison. And so one of the sad things is the dealers who deal on the street, if we catch them, something generally happens, and our folks at the attorney's office are great at helping keep our community safe from those, as are the police. And yet we have people who make business decisions which end up addicting people, thousands, tens of thousands of folks. And the way they are hurt is their business has to pay something for it if we win. And it's always struck me as one of those things that's kind of a sad statement about how we hold those folks accountable. So,
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just to that comment, I agree with you, but I will share with you that our lieutenant for the Lake Superior Drug and Gang Task Force, Lieutenant Kazel, would tell you that when we arrest these drug dealers who are destroying our children and our communities, a lot of times they make bail and are out doing the exact same thing before the paperwork on their report is dry. And so he will share with you that there's 2 or 3 times where they've been arrested, and the 4th time they're out there doing the same thing. So when you get in the federal system, there's more of an opportunity to keep them away from our young kids for a longer period of time. So our law enforcement does a fantastic job. This is my point being, Mr. Chair, is the law enforcement is doing what they can within the law, but you understand that it's cyclical because they're getting out and doing the same thing. Right. And so I think that we as a community have to move forward with this, and also really put some money into education and our youth who are the future in this country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think I was making a slightly different point, which is simply that CEOs of big businesses who treat the drugs that they sell as something that can be sold in massive amounts should be held accountable. And we don't really hold them accountable when we sue them. Their company pays the price.
Exactly.
And that's one of the sad things. And I kind of am, I know you're putting your finger up, Commissioner.
My pointing finger.
Okay. So one quick last comment, and then we're going to go. But we kind of have a 2 bites at the apple, so
Well,
this is more.
long bites. I had a long bite. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Attorney Rubin for what he said about going after the dealers and not the users. I noticed this morning, so thank you for that, Attorney Rubin, that making that point. And I noticed this morning in the paper, one of our, probably the most conservative member of Congress, Jason Lewis, but he also has a libertarian twist, is working with a congressman from Virginia, the state of Virginia, not my hometown, to stop throwing users in federal and state prisons and throw the real criminals, the dealers, and in this case, maybe the CEOs are the ones that should be going there. So I'm glad to see that our most conservative congressman is working towards a goal like that, and I want to thank the attorney for making public that statement that we're not throwing more users in jail. We already got enough that we're going after the dealers and the big wheels.
Okay. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Attorney Rubin.